Hey guys, Sko here, and we are going to be looking at the Paladin Talents, Artifact Points, and stat priorities for a Protection Paladin in a raiding environment for Emerald Nightmare. Let's jump straight into the Paladin Talents. The Frontline is quite an easy choice with the Blessed Hammer. The second line, you got Bastion of Light. You then have on the third line the Blinding Light. It's actually the only talent on this line that does damage. So the AoE Disorientate, we go Blinding Light. And this line is an interesting one. It's the first interesting line, I guess you could say. So you've got Blessing of Spell Wadding. Now this is obviously situational. It's a 3-minute cooldown, and it gives a party member or raid member magic immunity for 10 seconds, guys. It replaces Blessing of Protection, so you lose the physical immunity, instead you get the magical immunity for 10 seconds. So again, this is very situational. You have to find particular elements inside the Emerald Nightmare where this is going to be useful. I'm sure there is some, you just need to find them. So that's obviously an option on this line, guys. Cavalier gives your Divine Steed 2 charges, great for movement speed, and great when combined with the Knight Templar, which reduces all damage taken while mounted by 20%. So these two go hand in hand. And you also have Retribution Aura, which is a relatively useless talent in my opinion. You deal holy damage to any enemy whose melee attack strikes a non-tank party or raid member. So this is not really interesting. So Cavalier, I guess, is your default choice. Sometimes you may switch to Blessing of the Spell Warning if you find particular uses for it. So that moves us on to the next talent line, guys. You've got Knight Templar, which gives you that, as we mentioned, 20% damage reduction. You have Hand of the Protector, which lets you heal a friendly target for 25% of the missing health. That's base. This obviously increases with versatility and such. So that's obviously a strong talent. This is a strong choice. Final Stand is also could potentially be a strong choice. I mean, arguably Final Stand is the strongest tank cooldown in the game, obviously. You taunt all targets within 15 yards for 8 seconds. That includes the boss, so you're basically tanking the boss for 8 seconds, completely immune to all damage. So that is obviously a very strong cooldown. The Hand of the Protector is probably your standard go-to talent on this line. Again, depending on how good you are, obviously you could use this Hand of the Protector to heal low party members in particular situations inside a raid. But most of the time you're going to use it when you're wanting to heal your fellow tank. So when you're off tanking and he's main tanking, you're going to be able to drop these heals on the tank. And it's quite easy to get this heal up to about 40% if you take into account the fact that it benefits from standing in consecration, for example, versatility, and so on, guys. So it is definitely possible to get this up to close to 40%. That was pre-patch. Maybe when you're in Emerald Nightmare it's closer to like 35, but it is a decent heal, so you should definitely consider that. So if you take Hand of the Protector as a talent choice here, guys, and move on to the next line, you are presented with options to, for example, Aegis of the Light is the big Paladin raid cooldown that everyone was talking about, guys, when it first came out, okay? So basically you channel an Aegis of Light that protects you and all allies standing within 10 yards behind you for 6 seconds, reducing all damage taken by 20%. Now the problem with this talent is that originally, when you read it, you're like, oh yeah, this is so good. Protection Paladin is one of the only tanks in the game, obviously, that has this kind of great raid cooldown. But then you really have to think about, inside the Emerald Nightmare, where exactly are you going to use the Aegis of the Light? Keeping in mind that it's only targets 10 yards behind you, which means the raid has to be gathered, or people have to be gathered, or it's only going to hit, like, for example, melee. But also you've got to keep in mind that while you activate this, you are also channeling for 6 seconds, so you are not physically doing anything yourself. So again, this is when you're going to be off tanking. It's very situational, guys. It's going to be a case of whether you can find situations in the Emerald Nightmare where this is usable and when it's not. I guess in a lot of people's minds, it's stronger than what most people are going to use it for in actual practice or actual reality. Again, though, I'm sure once we start Mythic that we can probably find some situations where Aegis of the Light is actually obviously a great cooldown to use inside the raid. So yeah, that's definitely an option. You've got Judgement of the Light, which is a little bit similar to the Warrior Inspiring Presence, I guess you could say. That basically you are healing the attackers, so the raid, 40 successful attacks, which means that the charges are going to be used up extremely fast. But then again, when your Judgement is on like a 4.5 or 5 second cooldown, obviously you're going to be reapplying this quite fast. So Judgment of Light is a decent ability for healing up the raid. It's, like I said, it's got kind of some similarities to the fact of like Inspiring Presence, just that Inspiring Presence is a continual passive. And finally, you've got Consecrated Ground, which is really not that interesting. By default, you're probably going to take Judgment of Light. If you can find a situation where Aegis is useful, then by all means you will take it. But in the most part, you're probably going to take Judgment of Light. Now that brings us on to the final talent line, and there is some interesting options here. Last Defender reduces damage that you take and increases damage that you deal by 3% per enemy. Like, in terms of rating, this is not hugely beneficial. I mean, it's still quite a strong talent, but the other options are stronger. Righteous Protector is going to be your go-to talent on this line, guys. Shield of the Righteous reduces the remaining cooldown on Light of the Protector and Avenging Wrath by 3 seconds. Avenging Wrath is the spell that increases your damage and healing by 35%. So obviously taking any kind of time off that is going to be great in terms of a cooldown. It starts at 2 minutes. And obviously Shield of the Righteous reducing the remaining cooldown on Light of the Protector, otherwise known as Hand of the Protector when you have it talented, is obviously then going to let you spam heals more frequently, either on yourself, on the off tank, on main tank, or on a raid member. So that's obviously quite cool as well. It reduces the cooldown quite significantly. I think the default cooldown is it says 10 seconds here. This will obviously reduce by 3, brings it down to 7. Then of course you've got things like Haste added in there, guys. So I mean, you can really get the Hand of Protector heal down to like what, 5 point something seconds. Depends on obviously on your gear. But yeah, that's obviously quite a strong talent. Then of course, if things are going well for you, or you need a DPS burst, then obviously you can choose Seraphim. Obviously, this is not, even though it buffs your stats like Critical Strike, Mastery, and Versatility, it's not actually a survivability gain in most circumstances, because you do have to sacrifice 2 charges of your Shield of the Righteous. So yes, it can be combined with Bastion of Light, which gives you the charges back. But then again, you could just use Bastion of Light and get the charges back while using normal Shield of the Righteous. So Seraphim is kind of like the ability where you're going to use it for DPS increases. Like, for example, certain bosses, again, like I always go back to saying, for example, the Eye in Owl Nightmare. But in general, Seraphim kind of feels like a talent that you're going to take when the bosses become too easy, and instead of needing defensive cooldowns, you want to go more offensive. Again, it's hard to say at what point you're going to choose Seraphim. It really is a talent that's going to require you to feel out the bosses, kind of feel the damage intake, the flow, especially when you're on Mythic rating. And there probably is going to be cases where you can actually take Seraphim and use it effectively as a DPS increase to help the raid, obviously, yeah, increase the raid DPS. So, but by default, you're going to take Righteous Protector, and Seraphim is like a good alternative, I guess you could say, in certain situations. So let's move on to the artifact points. Now, the artifact points, we are going to move, first of all, to... Now, okay, let's just talk about the gold points, first of all. Now, when I originally started looking at these gold points on the Paladin, I wasn't necessarily blown away. I wasn't super amazed. If we look at, for example, the Light of the Titans, this again goes back to the Hand of Protector use, or Light of the Protector, depending on whether you talent it or not. It will heal for 500% attack power over 15 seconds. Now, I think with some basic calculations, that this is going to roughly work out at about maybe 1% health per second for 15 seconds. So it's kind of a slow trickle of healing, not necessarily something really epic in regards to gold talent trait. So not super amazing, not really that impressive. Now we go to Bulwark of the Order. Now this is obviously interesting. Avengers Shield also shields you for 8 seconds, absorbing 20% as much damage as it dealt. This is good in certain situations, but it's obviously better when you have AoE packs. So when you're in like dungeons, this talent is much better in dungeons than it is in raids in general, and especially when you combine it with like the Tears Enforcer. The Knowledge of the Watchers causes Truth Guard to deal damage to all enemies within 5 yards of the target hit by Avenger's Shield. So there's a good chance that these two golden traits can be comboed. So Tears Enforcer can be comboed with the Bulwark of the Order to give you a better absorb. But again, this is more beneficial the more targets that Avenger's Shield actually hits. So, like I said, guys, I personally, whether I'm misunderstanding because I haven't spent that much time on Paladin personally, whether I'm misunderstanding the strength of these talents or not. I don't necessarily find the Paladin golden traits to be particularly strong for raiding, but we're going to basically work our way towards Tears Enforcer as the primary choice, guys, because like I said, the heal over here, Light of the Titans, is the least interesting in my opinion. So we're going to work our way around towards that. Now this is actually quite a cool talent, guys, worth mentioning. Faith's Armor increases your armor by 30% when under 40% health, which makes Paladins obviously even harder to kill. Again, Righteous Crusader, interestingly enough, guys, Paladins have got this great ability of just reducing flat damage that they take, and here's just another artifact trait where they take an additional reduced 3%. We're going to go into Hammer Time. We're going to go into increase the duration of Consecration by 3 seconds and Tears Enforcer. So we have the first talents, guys. We're now going to go down to our second one, the Bulwark of the Order. Increase the maximum health by 3%, and boom, we have Bulwark of the Order with 18 talent points spent, which means we have 2 talent points left to spend, guys, before the first release of Emerald Nightmare, because as I've been saying in the other videos as well, the estimate is that you get 20 artifact points to spend until the release of Emerald Nightmare. So we've spent 18, we've got 2 left to go. These 2 are going to be spent in increasing the healing done by Light of the Protector by 10%. So that brings us up to 20 points, guys. So obviously Scatter the Shadows is quite a good talent, is quite a good artifact talent, especially if you take Hand of the Protector and you're going to be healing the off tank a lot. Then obviously it's building up that heal as well. So it's interesting. So like I said, you can probably get that Hand of the Protector, Light of the Protector up to at least 40%, and standing in Consecration combined with your Mastery and your Versatility and so on. If we were to continue the artifact tree round, we would go for the, I guess you could say we'll go for the Unflinching Defense, Bashing the Truth, finally get Light of the Titans, and that leaves us with 4 talent choices left, okay? Sacrifice of the Just, which is actually quite good, quite a good cooldown. Reduces Blessing of Sacrifice by 60%. This 60 seconds, sorry, this is quite strong. Brings it down to, I believe it's on a 2-minute 30 cooldown, which brings it down to 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, which is obviously quite good. So this would probably be my next talent choice. Or would you do Holy Damage or Back to the Attacker? Yeah, I mean, we're left with different options here. Forbearant Faithful, Sacrifice of the Just, Painful Truths, or the Stern Judgment. So the Stern Judgment is not actually that bad a talent, guys, because when you crit with your Judgment spell, it actually reduces the cooldown of Shield of the Righteous by 1 second. So interestingly enough, this talent is definitely not a bad pickup. I mean, this is purely up to you guys what you want to pick. Do you want DPS increase from a defender being active? I would say this is a relatively weak talent. Do you want this again? Forbearant Faithful, I don't think is particularly strong. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, I mean, this is only each active forbearance you have caused increases. Increases the cooldown recovery rate of your forbearance, causing abilities by 50%. So what this really means is that you can cast 2 forbearance spells, guys. You've got Blessing and Protection, and then you can obviously cast forbearance on yourself, whether it's through Divine Shield or other means. So basically, this could maybe take like 30 seconds off the cooldown of, for example, maybe like Divine Shield or something. So I don't think this talent's strong. I don't actually think this talent's strong either. This is definitely the strongest of the 1-pointers, so we'll put a talent point there. Then we'll go for Stern Judgment, and then you're just left with like capping these 2 out. We're going to take this one first, yeah. And that ends the artifact points on the tree, guys. Now, when it comes to stat priority for Protection Paladin, as always, guys, surprise, surprise, Haste is the first stat prio. We've got Versatility as second. Versatility actually increases the heal that you do with your Light of the Protector or Hand of the Protector. Finally, we've got Mastery, which is mainly impacting your Shield of the Righteous. And then at the bottom, guys, we've got Critical Strike, which translates to Parry for Paladins. And also, like I mentioned, interestingly, it also takes 1 second off your Shield of the Righteous cooldown when you crit with Judgement. So that's what crit does there. So yeah, guys, that's my thoughts on Protection Paladin, on the talents, artifact points, and stat priorities. So let me know what you guys think, if you agree, disagree, and thanks for watching, guys. See you on the stream, or see you on the next YouTube video. Cheers.